setting up now.
So again, I'll call this meeting to order, 11:08, the March 2nd Planning Commission meeting, and we'll start with roll call. Mark,
Tom Aiden,
like absent.
Sam Battle,
I'm here.
Barry Hubbard,
Here.
Chad Schneider,
Here.
Derek Firestein,
Well, Dawn is in place of Derek, so we'll change that, but the Dawn Calvert
I'm here.
Mayor Whitfield,
here,
Eric Tedrow.
absent. So we do have a quorum, but we do have 2 absences. Have you heard any excused absences, Daryl or Mark? Any calls or anything? They may, go ahead.
I think Eric made mention, I believe it was last meeting, that he wasn't going to be available for today's meeting.
Okay,
That's all
all right. All right, so we'll start with the approval of the minutes from January 5th and 19. You got those sent to you from Mary via email. Any questions on the minutes? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve those. We'll do one at a time, the January 5th minutes.
So poops. I move to approve.
All right, thank you, Mr. Battle. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Any further discussion on the January 5th minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And were there any abstentions? The next minutes are for January 19th. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Schneider. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Battle. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, so we have on the agenda today 2 public hearings, and we also have a design review as a part of the first hearing. So we'll start with the first one, and we will start with Mr. Farkas. Is that you to start this one off?
Thank you, Mayor. This is public hearing number 2021-10008 for 212 East Avenue. The proponent is requesting a location variance to accommodate a new wood deck in the front yard of the site referenced. The accessory structure deck is proposed to be located adjacent to and several inches from the front sidewalk or property line of East Avenue. Per the Elyria Codified Ordinance, Section 1158.03, accessory uses other than signs and fences shall be located in the rear yard only and located not closer than 6 feet from any lot line and covering not more than 35% of the required rear yard. Findings. The property is currently zoned business downtown district, the requirements of which can be located in the Elyria Codified Ordinance, Chapter 1158. Per section 1158.06, minimum front yard setback stipulates there shall be no minimum front yard setback for properties in a BD downtown district unless the property is within the same block as of any residential district, in which case the front yard setback shall be 20 feet. The proposed deck is considered an accessory use as defined in section 1125.105, of which states accessory use means the use subordinate to the principal use of the building on the same lot and serving a purpose naturally and normally incidental to such principal use of the building, provided any such use was begun at the same time or after the construction of the principal building. A variance is needed due to the proposed location of the deck. The proposed deck location and concerns with the proximity to the sidewalk were discussed with the ownership and designer of / architect on 2/3/21 via a Zoom meeting. The specific topics of discussion were as follows. Number 1, location / deck setback of the deck to the property line / right of way is not specifically indicated on the site plan and is assumed to be on or several inches away. Deck construction or projections may extend beyond the property line, thus more information is requested and a specific number is needed. Number 2, location and height of the deck would interfere with the current visual line of sight of vehicular traffic in and out, as vehicles would need to extend beyond the deck when exiting the establishment, which would protrude well into the public sidewalk. Number 3, the need for design review approval. The conclusion / recommendation during the meeting was to have an architect reassess the site and adjust the deck location, possibly pushing the deck away from the front property line several feet, thus allowing an overall improved line of sight and reaction time for drivers / patrons exiting the establishment. A specific setback from the front property line was also to be provided. Per the revised information received with the variance request, the location is unchanged and the specific setback is still not delineated. Staff recommendations. Per the information presented and possible hazard the deck location would create to the general public, I am unfortunately not in favor of the request. I will also defer to the City of Elyria Chief Engineer John Schneider for additional input regarding vehicular traffic, and as to the exact location from the right-of-way is still unclear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farkas. Dawn, I know you've worked with this group here. This is, the company's trying to open up an ice cream shop and is looking at doing some work on East Avenue. You have any updates, Director Calvert, you'd like to share out from your conversations with them?
No, I think, I was a part of that Zoom call that Mr. Farkas's report discusses. The project's moving forward. It was delayed due to COVID, but they are hopefully going to be opening this spring and summer. But yes, this deck issue is one that needs to be
Still work through.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone on the line from the ice cream shop? Mark, is there anyone in the waiting room waiting to get admitted?
No.
Okay. Well, I guess our next steps are, John, you want to add any input on this as well? Go ahead, Chief Engineer.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I agree with what Daryl said. Building the deck out to the property line would definitely hinder the line of sight for vehicular traffic that travel through the parking lot and pedestrians on the sidewalk. So I concur with what Daryl said.
All right, so if that's the case, any further discussion? And then I ask, are there any other proponents? Are there any other proponents?
Through you, Mayor.
Yes, please.
Would you like for me to give my design review findings now, or?
Is that related to this deck?
One of the waivers would be for the deck.
Okay. I don't know, should we treat them separately since this is the variance for, Jim, I have to defer to you. Should we treat?
It's not gonna hurt to have Ashley weigh in and give her commentary at this point.
But it's a separate item we're gonna be voting on too.
Correct.
So go ahead, Director Scott.
Thank you. So the plans, as noted, indicate the installation of a new deck, an ADA ramp, and new structural columns. Further, the rear porch will be removed and replaced with a new precast concrete stoop with metal rails. The applicant is also proposing to install new 5-pon window heads over the existing windows on the second floor of the west elevation, vinyl shutters and shutter dogs. The downtown design review guidelines prohibit the removal of columns, panels, or ornamentation that were original storefront elements, and the removal or altering of window trim and ornamentation is also prohibited. So those two waivers would be needed for the deck, the columns, and the windows.
Mark, if you could scroll down, there's some of the visuals of the building we're referring to, and then if you go up a little bit, you can see the kind of design. And Director Scott, what was your recommendation around this variance?
In terms of the columns and the 5-pon window heads and the rear porch, I support that. The deck, there are some issues, as Daryl had stated, along with engineering, but if the variance isn't granted, then I guess the waiver wouldn't matter. So I would recommend approval of that waiver if the variance is granted.
Okay.
I have a question. The current design of the building, that doesn't meet does it currently in the actual look of it currently at this moment, does that even meet design review guidelines? Or was this before?
Well, this one's a little tricky through you, because it's more of, looks like a home instead of an actual, commercial building. So the colors, the applicant will have to provide colors, to us before any installation happens to make sure that, those do comply with the design review guidelines, but there's nothing really within the guidelines that it doesn't match right now. I mean, the back porch, I don't know when that was installed. The front deck, I don't know when that was installed, if that was original or not to the property.
Okay, thank you.
I gotta add one.
I do have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Barry. Go ahead, Barry.
When as part of Daryl's report, I was a little confused. Downtown generally requires a 0 setback. Is that what we're dealing with? Although because this is near other residential properties, it doesn't. It requires a 20-foot setback. Am I understanding things right?
Mayor, through you, Mr. Hubbard. The location of this accessory use, keep in mind it is accessory. Our code says anything of this nature is supposed to be in the rear yard. If they were to build an addition on the front of the building, they could go right up to the property line. But since this is an accessory to the use, they plan on using it for eating out ice cream on tables and chairs. People come in and they can sit out and enjoy it right on the front deck. But the location of this is specifically where it is, right up to the sidewalk, gives little or no warning to any pedestrians coming by on a bicycle, walking by with a stroller. I have high concerns for its current location and height, because in a car or a van, you'd have difficulty seeing over that, and especially if people were sitting on the deck and blocking and obscuring the view.
So, Mr. Mayor, I guess the question that I have, or I guess the confusion that I have is it sounds like to be in compliance with the code downtown or the ordinances, if they added onto this building, they would have to bring it to the property line. Yet we're saying it's a safety concern to bring something less solid than a building to bring to the property line. I'm a little confused when it seems like it's safety concerns that would keep us from permitting this, while at the same point saying, but strict compliance with the rule would say they could put a full 2-story addition and have to take it to the property line to be in compliance without a variance, if I'm understanding it right.
That is exactly what the ordinance states. And this goes back to my point of we have an antiquated ordinance. It just doesn't communicate. And that makes, if you build this addition right up to the sidewalk, like many old buildings are, you do have that issue now, which creates a problem. The goal is to try to avoid that. Now, the intent with a building is you won't have the populace sitting there. You won't have 16, 30 people sitting on this deck. So keep that in mind. When you have a building, you have one focal entrance, which hopefully would be a side load entrance instead of right off the sidewalk. So there's pros and cons. When you invite the public to that general focalized area, you have a high probability of people being right in the line of traffic. So there is give and take, but that's a great question.
And what's the current setback with this? I'm looking now on this.
Our downtown, well, the deck itself does not specify from the property line, which is one of my concerns. If the board votes on that today, this is in limbo of whether this is in the right of way right now and the board would approve it as drawn, or how the distance is from the actual distance of the property line, which I've asked several times to get and I have not received it. But I think if it were considered, that be a stipulation as part of the approval.
What would be a safe distance from the, oh, go ahead, Mr. Snyder.
Do you know what, though it's basically the same question you were just asking, I think, the building to the north of this, what is their setback? Because that's ultimately going to block the right, the view from this corner. What is their setback from the street or whatever, or the sidewalk on the building north of this? Do you know?
Mayor, through you and Mr. Snow, are you referring to the church or the
The
Old
church,
Woman's Club?
yeah. I think it's the church, right?
The church itself is, if I had to guess, 3 feet away. They do have a ramp and some green space, so they have actually a little more space than what's proposed here. As you can
So-
tell from the photo on the screen, they are slightly offset. And right now, Mr. Fisher is proposing, I think, a 12 or 15-foot deck protruding out.
It looks like
I don't have-
17.
So you can kind of guesstimate the distances there. So there is some advance notice. Our discussion in the meeting was, if you're in a vehicle, the nose of the car, I don't know, 5-6 feet, you'd have to stick out before your line of sight would be able to get out enough to see the sidewalk. And since this comes right up to it, half the car would be over the sidewalk and it could be too late.
Makes sense. Would it make, I don't think this would make any difference if it were a patio versus it's going to be the same. I mean, the height would be dropped just by the height of whatever the deck is. I'm just thinking out loud.
And the problem with that problem, Chad, is that entranceway is, 3
Still blocked.
feet up in the area.
Yeah.
As you can see on the one photo, the deck they have on the building now, that's about 36 inches off the ground. That would go level straight across to the sidewalk. So you're 30 plus inches off the ground and you sit in a car, you think your line of sight, I don't know, about in the 4-foot range, that would make it very difficult.
Do we have any ordinance regarding the height of something outside, or does this just fall in accessory category regardless?
We do have a height restriction for buildings, but as an accessory use, it's trying to prohibit this due to the nature of the accessory use. And it's inviting a lot of people to sit up there, a lot of movement, a lot of pedestrian traffic.
I've got to add one, I'm going to add one thing. So the Board of Zoning Appeals, we're a lot more diligent now than they were a year ago. There's a Duncan B. Middlefield case, and I want to go over some criteria. We haven't really had a case like this, but we should do this with any variance. And these are basically the 7 things you've got, 7 things you have to look at. Whether the variance is substantial, whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered, and whether adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment, whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of government services, whether the property owner purchased property with knowledge of the zoning restriction, whether the property owner's predicament feasibly can be obviated through, that's more zoning, but through some other method other than the variance, and whether the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed and find substantial justice. It's really more of a zoning comment in a case, but I still bring it up that you have to look at the overall characters and issues that arise when you make a decision.
So I wish they were on here as well. We could kind of talk with them about what their plans were and how they might be able to adapt them. And so we might be able to entertain something different, but without having them here, it's hard to kind of speculate what would be acceptable to them in terms of setback. So it's kind of hard to even have that. So we could do 1 or 2 things. One, we could table it until we get a conversation with them. Next thing on the agenda, we're going to be talking about a special meeting that's being held. Or we could just vote on it now and then work with them to come back.
Mayor, I'll just,
Mr. Mayor,
oh, I'm sorry. Mayor, food for thought. During our meeting, we did discuss with the ownership the possibility. They had asked what would be a comfortable distance to provide that line of sight. And our number we came up with is 2 to 3 feet. It'd be minimal loss. Per the plans, the deck protrudes out 17 feet. That's quite a distance. And if they bumped it back 2 feet, they would lose minimal space and still provide a little more advance notice for vehicular traffic.
So Daryl, you mean bringing it in, not going 2 to 3 feet out, you mean 2 to 3 feet from the road?
If you're standing on the sidewalk, you're pushing it back to the building.
Okay, just verifying.
and based on your previous comments too, that would put it in line with where the church is at?
Close to.
I think as long as it's close to that, it would be, more attractive.
I would.
They're
I would
leaving
ask
the
our-
existing porch,
I'm sorry.
correct? They're leaving the existing porch and then putting the deck in front of it, correct? They're not, this deck isn't included in the measurement of the porch.
I can't see the drawing. There it goes. As you can see from the side view on, it's called sheet A101 in the lower right-hand corner. You can see they're leaving that roof element intact. And the plans aren't clear if they're saving the existing deck and just butting to it with new. If I had to guess, they're building all new to make it uniform and flat.
Yeah, I will say we have some pretty serious impediments in the sense that their plans haven't been corrected. I like the idea of moving it back, but I think they need to work with Daryl to have a better understanding for us to vote on and for them to understand what they're getting. Daryl, do you disagree?
No, I totally agree. And I think we also mentioned that John may have had concerns due to the proximity of right on the right of way. There could be utilities in the way, underground lines. When they start drilling holes to support their deck, that could be problematic. So I think the concern was to get it back to avoid some of that concern.
Mr. Mayor, if I can ask, and maybe this is a question for Jim as much as anybody. At this point, since it seems like the drawings that have been provided do not provide sufficient information for us to act, would it be appropriate to table it? Or is a more appropriate course of action to have a decision on this, and then if they want to re-present something different in the future, they can? Does it make a difference procedurally?
I mean, normally they're here to table it because they make the motion to table it. We're kind of taking their position for them. That's the drawback I have at tabling it. If they were here and wanted to table it, I'd be the first one to say best idea going, because they could then go back to Daryl, save time, money, etc. But we're tabling without any input from them. So normally I'd say you issue a decision, then they have to reapply. I wish they were here because I'd tell you to table in a heartbeat if they were willing to do that.
Thank you.
So if we were to vote and not approve it, what would their next steps be? Is that where
they'd correct their paperwork and have to go through the process, so they'd have a filing fee and a little more time, correct? Daryl, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but otherwise they can still come back to the next meeting. They can file next week with the corrections. Again, my guess is they have to go to their architect. This is going to take a while. They're not going to come back in 2 or 3 days. They got to do their homework. And again, I think Daryl, I don't have any problem with calling them and saying, hey, this is how we voted. But if you get these things done and reapply, it can be heard again. You can't tell them how we're going to vote because we don't know. But I think everybody has the idea of what needs to be done if there's a possibility of this to pass. So they're going to have to redesign this with their architect and submit new plans, which isn't going to be something done in a day or two.
Yeah.
Per our meeting, when we talked about adjusting it, I really thought, Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong, that they were going to go back and take our advice and push it back. I was quite surprised when the plans came in with no change, and they basically said they want to go for the variance. But I don't understand why they wouldn't kind of try to meet us halfway.
And if that's the case, it's even harder to table it if you've had that discussion and they still pushed it out to the street.
Well, no, you're saying they submitted these plans, you had a conversation, said they should push it back, and we just haven't been in contact since.
No, we talked about it, Mayor, in my report earlier last month about, hey, let's adjust it. And the need for a variance either way, whatever they do, they're going to need a variance.
Yeah.
We recommended that I would be more in favor of the variance if it were pushed back, giving us a little more comfort zone. And the plan came in with the application, as you see here, unchanged.
After the discussion.
After the discussion, yeah, it's mind-boggling.
Based on that, you had the discussion. I was hoping they would hear what we had to say and ask to table it. Based on the fact that they had the discussion, they didn't do what we asked. I think you're better to vote today. But again, it doesn't stop them from reapplying. We're not here to try to stop a business. They just
No. I was just thinking
they need to get their ducks in order.
Yeah, I was just thinking about timing wise, if there was just a miscue in the timing of the communication, and that they, if we table.
Good question.
Now, just for the group,
you keep on muting, Don. I'm like, you're ready to say something. I get ready to call on you, then you mute back. Are you trying to say something?
Well, I did just send a text message seeing if they could join us for this discussion. I'm not sure they're a very engaged business. So I'm surprised that they're not available today. So
Yeah.
send them a text for that. The other thing I did want to mention though is that, I think it's just important to take into consideration the library and the increased pedestrian traffic that's going to cause in that area. So I think everybody's aware of where the building is, but it's going to be across the street from the library. So the hope is, and I believe this to be true, it's going to be a very successful ice cream shop, getting a lot of traffic from the library and the development that's going to occur downtown. So I just wanted to share that, make sure everybody was aware of that, because I do think it is an important consideration.
So while we're waiting for the text, after we get through our other business, we'll come back to this and just vote.
That's fine.
Vote on it.
Yeah, we can table this for.
Let's keep the meeting moving along, and then we'll come back to that. The next piece we have is Express Wash Concepts. Mr. Farkas.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. The request is, the proponent is requesting a location variance to accommodate a proposed car wash. The new structure is proposed to be 11 feet 4 inches from the side east property line when per the Elyria Codified Ordinance, section 1162.07A, requires a setback of 15 feet be maintained. Staff recommendations. It should be noted that the proposed car wash was recently rezoned from a business neighborhood district to a business automotive oriented district per Planning Commission case number 4-2020-129 on 1/5/21. I've completed my review and find the above request complies with the spirit and intent of the zoning code and maintains the integrity of the abutting zoning districts. Therefore, and in favor of the request. If the commission recalls, this came into the rezoning. We did briefly discuss the location of the building. There are 3 adjacent parcels to the east that are not incorporated into this project, which gives it a buffer. So that made it much more easier to say this would be a good fit.
And they own the other parcels.
And they own the other 3. Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Thank you for that. And I believe Director Scott also has a design review, so we'll treat this like the last one if you want to give a report on that.
I do not have a design review on this one at this time, actually.
Okay. Maybe this was just an extension of their.
I think, Jason, are you on the phone? There you are. So I didn't have a chance to call him back. We have one other issue. We can still work with this, but there's been some confusion. They have a lot, part of the rezoning is a lot consolidation requirement. And there's some issue whether it was going to be by a deed or by just a plat. We can grant this variance, but it also still has to be subject to that lot consolidation being done, as the same with the rezoning. Council will not hear it, or my opinion, probably even pass it unless that consolidation is done. I know Jason and those guys are working on that. But again, this variance would also be subject to that lot consolidation requirement. That allows
we agree with that, Jim. The consolidation typically occurs, as we talked about, once we actually purchase the property, but we can have everything be contingent on that. And similar to the gentleman before, we have certain timeframes that we have this property in contract with the seller, so we have obligations to him and things of that nature. So we'll work with whatever parameters on a conditional basis that you all see. And Ashley, I'm sorry, Ashley did not have a comment on the design review. I believe is that correct? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear earlier.
Through you, no, the applicant did provide the building materials, and that I'm in the process of, finalizing my end of the revised report. As far as design review goes for this project, on my end, everything is in compliance.
Thank you, Ashley. Yes. Did you like my material board? That was my first attempt at my own material board.
It looks great.
So Jim, how should we tackle this?
You just vote with that condition on the variance, that the variance would be approved subject to the lot consolidation.
Okay. All right, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the variance for Express Car Wash at 620 Griswold. with a new structure that's being proposed to be 11 feet 4 inches from the side east property line. When per the code, Elyria Codified Ordinance Section 1162.07A requires a minimum of 15 feet be maintained with the condition of the lot consolidation. I think that's it. Is that it, Jim?
Yep.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Snyder. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Second by Mr. Hubbard. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. And were there any abstentions? All right, now do we need to also vote on the design review application as well?
As far as the aesthetics with the design review, everything was in compliance. So
Right.
that end of it was approved at the staff,
At the
or will be
staff level.
approved.
That's what I
staff
thought. There's
level.
nothing.
Gotcha.
There's nothing.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, unless there's something with, the zoning that Daryl would also need, approval on, so.
Nope.
But as far as I go, we're good.
Mayor, through you, the zoning came back for the dumpster. That indicates compliance. The only issue we didn't discuss, which was not presented to us, was the signage, which the ownership is aware is a separate submittal, and we'll go through the process again.
Okay.
Jason, if you have any questions on that plat or deed, just give me a call.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. Yeah, and then perfect. And then we'll deal. Are we going to deal with the traffic in a separate issue, or how does that work?
Daryl, that's more your question.
Mayor, through you, that was actually brought up by John Schneider. I can't speak to that. If Mr. Schneider is on, he can address that concern.
Yes, we did talk to the proponent about the traffic out there. Actually, City Council, they were a little concerned with the proximity to the intersection. Looking at everything and how it's laid out, they did install the driveway as far away from the intersection as possible, which is good. The only concern I have with the overall traffic is the left turning movements going out of the facility, and then that largely because you're crossing 2 lanes of traffic, and State Route 57 and the traffic volumes that can come off State Route 57. At this time, in talking with the proponent, one of the things they're going to try to mitigate in the future is if it becomes a problem out there, the left turn movement coming out of the facility, they talked about installing a sign limiting left turns during peak hours. As I expressed to them as well, the left turn movement going out of this, that if it becomes a problem, I would have to go out there and I would have to act, and I would have to put out a quick curb in the future, similar to what's over there by Wendy's. At this time, I don't think it's necessary because of the traffic volumes today are just not there, but I do know there's a lot of growth going on in the area that will change the dynamics of the road. And unfortunately, it wouldn't show up today in a traffic study. So we are working to work with the developer on that. So.
Thank you. And Mr. Schneider, we submitted a memo from the traffic engineer earlier today. I didn't know if you had a chance to review that. So please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay. Yeah, I did not get it yet.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. Moving along, our next piece on the agenda is.
Did we vote? Did we vote?
Yeah, I think we did, didn't we?
You made the motion. And
We didn't vote. We only made.
we didn't have a second or a vote.
Sorry.
Yeah,
No, I did.
It
we
was
did
seconded
vote.
by Mr. Hubbard and then Mayor Whitfield.
Oh, okay. We did have a
Yeah,
second.
yeah, we voted. Y'all just scaring me, man.
No, no. Yeah. Mark, did you say we did vote?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't.
And the condition was the plat, and that's what
Okay.
went down that path.
I apologize.
But did you guys also vote for the design review? I apologize. Not that I'm
We didn't
stepping
need
in.
to. It was.
We
done
don't
at
need
the
to.
traffic level.
Okay, great. Thanks all.
Sorry, Mayor Whitfield.
You good? You good? So thank you, Jason. We'll go ahead and move along with the let's see, with RBR development, and we had some conversation already with Richard, and so Jim, if you want to give an update kind of on the status of this, and then we'll talk about next steps.
Well, again, because it was listed just as a planning commission case and not a public hearing, we have to have that public hearing and published, and it needs to be 7 days. So it's my recommendation that we, again, this is the city's fault, this is not the proponent's fault. It was something we didn't recognize. It was brought to our attention inadvertently after doing the same thing for 4 years. So basically what would happen is I would, if the members think we are available next Friday, and again, this.
Or Thursday. So
Thursday, well, Thursday if we get the publication in Wednesday, today's Tuesday, I don't think you're gonna get the publication until Thursday because at 11 o'clock or 12, the Chronicle stops taking things. So we're.
yeah, that's why I'm hoping we can wrap this meeting up quick so Mark can go ahead and try to do that. And so I was gonna ask the commission to hold Thursday at 11 and Friday at 1 as 2 times. If you could just hold those 2
Right.
times.
Let's do that, and then we can let everybody know.
And
Those
we'll let
dates
you
work
know
for
if we're
people,
able to
and
do
it should
it.
take less than 5 minutes to have that meeting, unless something unusual pops up. We've passed Mr. Barron's other request. We've had no opposition. I assume we'll have none for the last phase.
Does that
And
work
then-
with the rest of the commission to hold those 2 times and have a special planning commission meeting for next Thursday or Friday?
Barry, Chad, does that work on your calendars, and Sam?
Are we thinking 11, the usual time?
Yeah, 11 on Thursday or Friday. I got a NOACA board meeting, so I'm not free until 1.
I think that would work.
If you just hold those 2 dates, as soon as we get off of this, Mark will go see how quick we can get the public notice in, and then we can, we'll confirm which day works.
Yeah.
Richard, is that okay with you if we get a chance to turn that around?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
We have to do it that way. I apologize, Richard. Thank you for your consideration.
No problem. Thank you.
Any comments from the staff? Eric, you got anything you want to add before we adjourn?
Yeah, if I could address the commission for 1 minute, Mayor, I'd
Yes,
appreciate it.
please.
I just want to give everyone an update. Some of you might not know me. I'm sorry. I'm Eric Brunig. I'm in the law director's office. I represent city council. And I just want to talk to you for a quick minute about the matter that you guys looked at a couple of weeks ago regarding Franklin School. If you recall, that was a zoning change request from residential to business general. And the planning commission, with good reason, as far as I'm concerned, I watched the replay of your meeting. You expressed some concerns, and you ended up voting against that. I've been working with City Council President Stewart and Mark Jesse and the applicant to try and find some middle ground on this. And I think what's going to happen is that council is going to send this back to you guys to look at it again. We're going to have the applicant file a deed to herself with restrictions, basically against using the property for certain purposes. You guys recommended this a couple of months ago on some property at the mall. You recommended approval of a zoning change subject to deed restrictions. So we kind of took that same strategy. So we're in the process of negotiating with her exactly which uses in a business general she would restrict herself from. We've got a good list so far. We've got 2 or 3 left that we're sort of, going back and forth on. But we'd expect that to come back to you at the April meeting to do 2 things. One would be a lot consolidation replat, because she's going to have to do a new plat to do her lot consolidation. And we would include those restrictions on that plat. So I just wanted to let you know that that's the situation, that council's probably going to send it back to you guys to look at, and just to be aware that that's what's in the works. So I was trying to capture everything on those restrictions that I recalled from the meeting that I watched a couple of weeks ago. So hopefully we've taken into account all of your concerns, but we will want you to weigh in before council takes a look at it again. So that was it. Just a quick update. So thank you.
And Eric is actually, we've worked and talked about this a little bit, because I explained your concerns, as Eric said, from the meeting and stuff. There's something like 60 lots over there, so she has to put that together. And then you guys had expressed concerns about other 63, is that what you said? There's a lot. 64, okay. 30, but there's a lot.
40.
Doesn't matter. But we also we also discussed the other schools, and maybe there was a need. No, I have made phone calls to the school, it appears there will be no other buildings coming our way, that they're going to do their normal thing with the rest of the buildings. So there's no need for planning for the future. That was one of the comments, that these may come back before us on other occasions for other schools. They've indicated they don't plan on basically getting ready buildings through the school the way that these three were. This one was diversified from the school to the city to this end user. So we don't need to be planning, well, what do we do the next school and the next school? I just want to make sure that was brought up and you were aware of that.
So yeah, I know part of what we talked about at the last meeting, our part of our homework was going to be looking at what were those pieces inside of the business general zoning that we were uncomfortable with in terms of thinking about schools being repurposed. And so as you heard with Franklin, they're going to go a different route because we're looking at doing the zoning overlay. I do think there's still something to be said about, there's still other school buildings, and that whether we own them or not, there's going to be a need to look at these things. But it sounds like we can treat these two that are right in front of us, McKinley and Franklin, as independents. But I do think we should be also thinking about the potential for the zoning overlay thinking in terms of this could be a future problem that happens, and we can maybe solve a future problem for folks who are in these seats in the future. But thank you for that update. That's good to know. And Dawn, you got it. Did you hear back from the Elmer's ice cream folks?
I did. Cynthia is going to call in. So I emailed her the information, but I'm going to text it to her really quickly too.
Okay.
Back on this other, the issue of the schools, I'm just kind of curious, what would be the process or how's that being explored in terms of if ever later they wanted to expand the use of the building, what would be the process if a deed restriction is in place? Is that something that could be waived by the city in the future, or what? Has that been talked about at all?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, deed restrictions to me are permanent unless, there's, I suppose if we're the intended beneficiary of that restriction, there's an argument to be made that we could waive that or, sign off on, a release of that restriction. Realistically, it's not easy to do. You know this, Mr. Hubbard, so I think you're just asking it so I can express it to the group. The process probably would involve, a quiet title action of some kind, almost a foreclosure of interests, and we would, file an answer agreeing with it or something like that. It wouldn't be easy, but it's designed not to be easy. I don't think anything that's done can't be undone. I believe that everything can be changed, but that was designed to be permanent. Unfortunately, our zoning doesn't really account for another way to have some business general uses, but not others. If you want to talk about like a use variance, I don't necessarily believe that's appropriate. My stance on use variances is that those are really only appropriate when you don't have an existing code provision that would address it. Otherwise, you're trying to usurp the legislative act of rezoning with a quasi-judicial process of, variance, approval processes. So, is it perfect? No. I think it's been alluded to earlier at this meeting, that there's been comments about the inadequacy of our zoning code. Daryl and I have had this discussion many times. Jim has joined in of late. We really are taking the position that this whole code needs to be torn down and rebuilt. And we've had a plethora of examples of that over the last couple of months, especially. So, very honestly, to your point directly, is this the best way? It might be. Is it a great way? No, not in a vacuum. But it would accomplish her purposes without necessarily intruding too much on other neighborhood issues. So it's a long answer to a short question.
No, that's what I was looking for. Thanks.
So do we want to continue with the two threads, like, continue to explore what an overlay might look like and simultaneously work to, wait to see this come back from in front of us in April? Do we want to continue to consider the overlay? Because that would be the work of this group.
Well, this group actually wouldn't do the overlay. Administration would, and then get the blessing of council. But I think we've got the input from these people.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like how we did with the mall. This group was the one that said, hey, here are the things we're concerned about.
Right.
And we provided that information to council.
Correct.
I would put, Mayor, through you. Eric and I briefly discussed the other schools and the potentiality of making some type of overlay. The uniqueness of a lot of these schools is location. They abut, sometimes I've said this before, it's a melting pot of diverse zoning districts throughout the entire city. The one on Franklin's completely surrounded by residential. You've got others that abut business general. I would say it's a case by case rather than reinventing the wheel and creating a cascade effect of zoning problems. If we say, hey, let's rezone, make an overlay in this district, as we found in the mall, it created multi side effects through we could end up changing the whole code anyway, trying to make it work. Does that sound like on point, Eric, of what you and I chit chatted about?
Yeah, somewhat, Daryl. I mean, I agree with that. The big thing I want to take out of that is I don't like to piecemeal these. You know, we put together that zoning overlay very quickly at the mall, and I think it's going to serve the purpose that we set out for it. But in general, just given all the other problems that we have with the zoning code right now, some of which we pointed out to you, some of which we discover on an almost daily basis, I feel like every time something new comes in. I mean, Daryl and I have had this discussion before, you know, what's the big thing coming up, you know, in downtowns anymore? It's microbreweries, restaurants. We don't have a zoning classification for those. You know, it's just an outdated code that doesn't really work in today's world. I see the need for this, Mayor. I don't want to sound like I don't, but I don't believe in piecemealing the code, trying to cobble together certain areas at the expense of others. I really think we need to look at this thing from the top down and tear it down and rebuild it. That's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be quick.
Thank you for that. So for the commission members, are y'all okay with that, for us to kind of hold off on that zoning overlay piece and kind of have another conversation about just the zoning overhaul, and maybe it gets addressed then? And to your point, Mr. Farkas, yeah, you look at where McKinley's located, like you said, right behind the business, and you look at Franklin side of the neighborhood, at Windsor inside of a neighborhood, it's very different depending on the neighborhood the school's in. So yeah, it would be hard to kind of apply one model to all of it. So y'all good with that? Just holding off on the overlay, and then right now treat them one by one until we get the zoning overall?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and I think I saw someone join. Dawn, is that your folks from Elmer's?
I believe that is Cynthia. Cynthia, are you on?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is Cynthia Oleksiak from Elmer's.
Thank you for joining. So we were discussing your request here for the variance, and wanted to know, I guess, do we want to try to solve this now? Has there been any traction or movement from the last conversation you had with Mr. Farkas around pushing the setback an additional 3 feet to accommodate their concerns?
Mr. Mayor, was that to me?
Yes. Did you all change our plans, and were you okay with having an additional setback of an additional 3 feet or so to accommodate their concerns for your front deck?
I don't believe that my husband John or I had received that notification.
Okay.
Of besides our last, I believe the last that we were waiting was our architect, Gary Fisher, had submitted something and included the site location, and I don't know how much of a setback, so I'm not positive. Daryl, do you happen to know what, or actually what had been submitted?
Mayor, through you to Cynthia. Hi, Cynthia. Yes, the information as we spoke about in our meeting and options of line of sight and possibly pushing the deck back. Mr. Fisher submitted the revised drawing with his variance application, and nothing has changed since the initial submittal, which implied that you guys wanted to keep it right where it was. Is that contrary to what you guys discussed after the meeting?
No, that is not. He he was supposed to do as requested through the meeting. I'm sorry.
So you were comfortable with the setback amount. So there, Mr. Farkas, can you do that? Share what your recommendation was, where you felt comfortable?
Absolutely, Mayor. Cynthia, my recommendation was to put it in a line or semi in line with the adjacent church on the northern corner. If you were to approximately push the deck back, if you're on the sidewalk looking at the building, push the deck towards the structure 3 feet, that should adequately give you some ample time to respond and give a little more notice. Because our concern was it's going to be a communicative kind of atmosphere. You're going to have people on the deck having ice cream, people be off the deck, hanging off the deck. It's going to be a high traffic volume. Hopefully, a lot of people come there to have ice cream. And the concern was, as we talked in our meeting, pedestrian traffic line of sight for vehicles leaving the establishment. So the concern I had was, as mentioned in our meeting, was we need to establish a property line. This, as requested in our meeting, I had said, hey, let's please identify where this sits. It just says from the sidewalk. There's no property line boundary. So if Mr. Fisher could please delineate that and indicate it's going to be 3 feet from the property line to the proposed deck, I think that would meet the intent for me and make the board feel more comfortable with the approval if they move forward.
Cynthia, how does that sound to you? Is that something you're amenable to, that if 3 feet from the property line, if we had that as a condition, that would work for you and your project?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we want to work with whatever is in the best interest of the location and what those needs would be for that area. So we are definitely in line with what Mr. Farkas said, that our intention was to move it back so that we would have that sight line. What would be the next steps then? Do we just resubmit, make sure that our architect completes that correctly?
Yeah, so it sounds like, depending on how the board votes today, if we were to vote to approve that, your next steps would be confirming all this, because we would have that condition on it. So you would confirm all this stuff with the staff at the city, between Mr. Farkas and Ms. Scott.
And for the motion, it would be 3 feet inside the sidewalk line, not the property line. So we'll make sure we delineate that. It would be 3 feet in.
From the property line, Jim, the property line. The sidewalk does not necessarily represent the property line.
No, I thought you wanted this 3 feet in from the sidewalk.
A property line, wherever that property line may be, my guess is it could be on the edge of the sidewalk. It could be further towards the building.
Okay, I just didn't want to use the property line as the street. That's what I'm trying.
Property line is boss, because what we don't want to do is approve it in the right of way, which would give us all kinds of legal headaches down the road.
I'm confused though, because the sidewalk could be your 3 feet from the line if the line is the curb.
If the sidewalk represents a property line, then as drawn, this would be accurate. But we don't know, since he doesn't specifically say how far the deck is to be from the property line. He just says it's right up to the sidewalk. It's unclear. And that's where, from not only a zoning aspect, a building code aspect, because this kicks in a whole nother level of safety. So the deck is proposed to protrude 17 feet from the structure now. If it only goes 14 feet, in theory, that's our 3 feet. And if the sidewalk is where it should be on the property line, a couple inches plus or minus, this should be okay.
So Gerald, I'm not trying to make this difficult. I want this lady to succeed. What if the property line is 2 feet outside of to the west of the sidewalk? Then that's not enough. And if it's 2 feet to the inside, then it might take off her deck where there's not enough room.
That's my point exactly, Jim, is when we initiated this, that was one of my points of interest, is let's figure out where the property line is, and it's still a mystery. If the board decides to say, hey, from the sidewalk 3 feet, that's a decision that you guys can make. But again, we're not 100% sure where the property line really is.
That's what I thought.
Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Hubbard. I think I got, was that Eric? Was that your voice?
That was Eric, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, this is not my place, but I'm just listening in on this. What if you said that you would make it 3 feet from the edge of the sidewalk or the property line, whichever is the more restrictive?
I like that.
Yeah.
As long as that 3 feet doesn't put us in the right of way.
Yeah.
Sure, well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Well, then the sidewalk line would be more restrictive. That's my point.
Thank you, Eric.
I'm writing this down. Whichever.
If you use the inside edge of the sidewalk as being one of those points, Jim, it couldn't be any further than that.
Right, and if the property line is in further, she'll have to come in further.
Right.
All right, any other discussion, and then I'm gonna go for it.
Technically, we're tabling this until they come back now that we've spoken to her.
No,
correct?
we're ready. No, we can
Oh,
vote
okay.
on it.
Daryl, you're okay with it as corrected with Eric's assistance, aren't you?
Yeah, that would about sum it up. Once we establish where it is, this will be right where we are right now. What do we do? And I think the caveat of establishing that on a revised site plan, and if it goes through the review process and complies with what we're talking about now, we won't have to come back.
Okay.
Cross our fingers.
I agree.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please.
this is Cynthia.
Buy me some time here. Go ahead, Cynthia.
If we could just ask that be maybe sent to us by email, just that one phrase from that sidewalk. And we are absolutely fine with that because we feel that even though the property line is a question right now, I think either way we are going to be fine with moving it back if the sidewalk is that side of line, that we move 3 feet back. We are absolutely okay with that.
Okay.
So, if someone will be able to provide that to us, and then I will make sure that I reach out to Gary and where would we need to send the revision to? Does that go to Ashley or Daryl or both?
Yeah, that'll go to Mr. Farkas, Daryl Farkas.
Daryl Farkas. Okay, thank you.
Eric, I need a lifeline. I was gonna go for it, but I don't want to butcher this thing, so.
I was just thinking out loud anyways. So.
I wrote 3 foot from the sidewalk or the.
Yeah, but I need the full, we got the concept. It's putting it in the language of a motion.
So I think the motion would be to approve the variance subject to the, now I'm thinking through this. Daryl, what do you got?
Yeah, I think you got it. Approve the variance subject to 3 feet from the edge of the sidewalk or property line.
Whichever is most restricted.
Whichever is more.
So moved.
Hold on, I gotta get
inside sidewalk, right? The inside edge.
Right.
Inside side. All right, I'm gonna do this again. Hold on. Inside sidewalk or property line, based on whichever is more restrictive. All right, so here we go. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the variance from section 1158.03 of the Elyria Codified Ordinance, accessory usage, to approve the variance subject to it being 3 feet from the inside of the sidewalk or from the property line, whichever is more restrictive.
Yeah.
Yep.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Snyder.
Second.
Seconded.
Second by Ms. Calvert. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. And were there any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Good job, Cynthia, hopping on here like this. Good job, Dawn, getting her in here. So
I do think we need to vote on the design review waivers for the
Gotcha.
exterior changes as well.
Yeah. So Director Scott, do you want to address the design review piece? Now that this has been approved with the variance. So again, this design review request was really asking for a variance in terms of, it was 3 things, but I'll let Director Scott mention those, and one of them will be based on the decision we just made. Director Scott's audio isn't there. Shoot, all right, let me see if I can pull it up. So if you recall, Director Scott didn't have any issues with the design review. The main thing she had issue with was the variance and the decision we were making. So I would look for a motion to approve the design review application subject to the previous variances, conditions being met.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Schneider. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Battle. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. And were there any abstentions? Okay, all right. Any other business or anything else for the good of the order? If not, Mark will get, one of our practices that we're really putting into place now. We'll get these decisions over to the council clerk immediately, and then we'll try to get this public notice piece, and we'll let you all know about the meeting for next week. But thank you all for your patience. Thank you, Richard, for your patience, and thank you all for the hard work today.